NA West has been dominated by one team for years now, Arcrum, Epicwell, and Rex. But in Season 8, this changed. A new challenger appeared. Reet, Favs, and Snacky. Favs and Snacky dropped Kenshi and picked up Reet. They have dominated the qualifiers with their hyper-aggressive playstyle, and they were the largest threat heading into this finals. Well, for Arcrum, Epicwell, and Rex, you know their extremely fundamental playstyle, but this tournament comes down to one thing. Can Reet's kills outweigh Arcrum's consistency? You know the final result, but let's see how both teams found success and how Epicwell, Arcrum, and Rex almost made the greatest comeback of all time. Game 1 starts with Reet, Snacky, and Favs landing Corny, and Arcrum, Epicwell, and Rex landing Believer Beach. Both teams quickly loot up and start to position for their Storm Surge. For Arcrum and Co, they base up on the mid-map hills and find their tags rotating towards the dead side of the zone. For Reet, their surge plan was different. It consisted of one thing: aggression. Reet's team pre-edited teams pushing for their Storm Surge and kill points. Going into half and half, Reet, Snacky, and Favs get a max distance pull, but they also have 2 pads. Arcrum, Epicwell, and Rex get half and half, and they also have a total of 5 launch pads going into this zone. Reet pushes into the zone and finds a nice kill going into first moving. First moving reveals and it pulls towards Reet and away from Arcrum, but this shouldn't be an issue since Arcrum, Rex, and Epicwell still have 5 launch pads. First moving starts to go and Reet, Favs, and Snacky immediately jump onto the high ground before tarping for the rest of the zone. Lurking in the mid ground though is Epicwell, Arcrum, and Rex, and they start to apply pressure onto Reet, Favs, and Snacky. In a frantic spray, Favs goes down, allowing Epicwell, Arcrum, and Rex to retake high ground. Reet and Snacky are forced to clutch up as a duo. Reet and Snacky clear out every layer they touch, killing many players in the process and removing many teams from the lobby, while Arc and Co are still dominating on height. Eventually the chaos is too much, making Snacky go down. Reet is still able to clutch up a few extra kills and placement points, putting them in a comfortable spot going into game 2, but Arcrum, Epicwell, and Rex are still alive, kicking on height, or so we think. In the chaos of that which Reet caused, Epicwell, Arcrum, and Rex are landed on their height, and they're forced to give it up, where they are quickly picked up by the rest of the lobby, dying 1 place after Reet in 5th. In game 2, Reet's team struggled with Storm Surge, and they had to make desperation plays to save themselves. This resulted in them dying early in first moving due to simply running out of materials. For Arcrum, we saw many similar struggles compared to Reet's team. Epicwell gets landed at the end of the first moving, resulting in this trio having a mediocre game, and neither team had really established a lead at this point. Game 3 started with Arcrum going down early to Storm Surge and having a 0-point game. For Reet though, this was their big game to jump up. Reet's team had some fantastic luck pulling both the 50-50 and first moving zones, and they were able to hold height almost unscathed from this position. Reet popped off, getting an 11 kill win that was absolutely dominated from height. Going into game 4, Arcrum's team only had 58 points and was struggling a lot more than they have done in previous grand finals. For Reet, Snacky, and Favs, the story is completely different. They are on 112 points and they are dominating this lobby in spectacular fashion. Going into game 4, there's a 54-point gap, and Reet is quickly building a near insurmountable lead. In game 4, both teams had good mid games and both were in great positions going into the first moving. Unfortunately, Epicwell and Rex die early in the endgame. Reet, Favs, and Snacky once again claimed high ground, where they were able to keep it for the rest of the game. The untold story though of this game was Arcrum's solo clutch. Arcrum got his team all the way to 3rd place and a few extra elims, clutching out very valuable points. In game 5, Arcrum's team got scuffed in the mid game and was forced to surf tarps the end game to save mats. They got picked off one by one before dying in 4th. For Reet, Favs, and Snacky, they once again had an easy height game where they took height and held it till the final 3v3, which they lost. Game 6 started and Arcrum's team got off to a hot start, killing Former out of the air, getting their surge up quickly. Reet positioned himself on the risky billboard to find his team's Storm Surge tags. Going into the end games, both teams had good loot and good positioning to do well. Unlike every other game so far, both these teams decided to play the low ground. Both teams played out their layers extremely well, and both of these teams pushed themselves deep into the 8th zone. Unfortunately for Arcrum, one mistake would cost them this game. At the end of 3rd moving, no one closed off the back of their tarps, resulting in the entire trio collapsing from this applied pressure. Taking advantage of the chaos that was caused from Arcrum's death, Reet, Favs, and Snacky masterfully played the low ground, pushing themselves into the final 3v3, where they barely lost due to Snacky dying with all the teams heal off. With this second, Reet's lead continues to climb by the end of day 1. Reet, Snacky, and Favs have a massive lead of over 80 points, and Arcrum's team was all the way down in 4th with only 148. But going into day 2, this will all change. Game 7 starts, and Reet's team begins to struggle. Reet, Snacky, and Favs push Midi, Nico, and Kaboo, and they lose Reet. This scuffs their entire game until they die in 24th, getting very few points. Arcrum got ahead of the surge early and got themselves into 4th zone with 4 launch pads and near max mats. Arcrum, Epicwell, and Rex get a max distance 50-50 pull, but safely get into the zone. First moving pulled close, and this trio is in a position to win this game. On first moving, Arkham gets knocked, but thankfully Epicwell and Rex are right there to get the res onto Arkham. They then launch pad to the front side of second moving, where they quickly establish themselves on low ground. When third moving pulls, they immediately get cut off by Bumboy, Batman, Booga, and Jagveer. Arkham intelligently doesn't try to force the low ground, and instead he goes back up to the mid ground and continue tarping. Next, Arkham wraps around zone to front side of low ground to reclaim it. Arkham, Epicwell, and Rex easily hold the low ground at this point until they come second due to zone playing up a mountain during the final 3v3. Games 8, 9, and 10 all have one theme: domination. Game 8 started with Epicwell, Arkham, and Rex claiming low ground late, and Reet, Favs, and Saki claiming the high ground early in the first moving. These two teams went into a heel-off, which Arkham barely won. Game 9, Arkham's worst game of the day, where they got 7th. Arkham's team struggled at Storm Surge in the moving zones, and Reet was able to capitalize on the weaker lobby by getting great luck pulling the 50-50 and first moving zones, giving them height throughout the endgame. Game 10, Arkham claims low ground and Reet claims high ground. Both teams push into the final 3v3, where Reet, Snacky, and Favs took 3 3v1s and lost the game. Going into the final 2 games, Reet, Snacky, and Favs still had a substantial lead, but these 2 final games would close it. Game 11 started with both teams taking fights. Arkham, Epicwell, and Rex fought a team at Logjam, and Reet fought Blizzard's teams to give both teams good Storm Surge going into the first Storm Surge threshold and 50-50 Storm Surge. Going into the first moving, both teams had good mats, and Epicwell and co had 2 launch pads, while Reet, Favs, and Snacky only had 1. Going into the first moving, both of these teams saw that they were far below Storm Surge, and they needed to make a play. Unfortunately for Reet, a play would never come, and they would get ticked away until they finally fell in 16th. Arkham, also below Storm Surge, had a different plan though. Arkham, Epicwell, and Rex completely 50-50'd height and won it, securing high ground for the rest of the game. Unfortunately for Arkham and co, his team lost all of their healing, so they couldn't pressure any of the teams below them. This resulted in them only getting 4 kills despite securing the win. The lack of kills from this height take cost them heavily in this tournament, and it may have swung it in their favor if the heals played out a little differently. Going into Game 12, Reet still had a big lead, but there's a chance for Arkham to make the comeback of a lifetime. But can they do it? Game 12 starts, and Reet, Favs, and Snacky early rotate onto the main building in Boney, finding a lot of surge tags from there. Arkham based on the Spire Tower to the east of Believers and got a gift by getting pushed by Nitrix, who were below Storm Surge. Arkham, Epicwell, and Rex cleaned up this fight really quickly, putting their trio ahead of Storm Surge for the whole game. Although Reet, Favs, and Snacky got good Storm Surge from Boney, they were still below Storm Surge going into the 50-50 Storm Surge. Arkham, on the other hand, was able to play out his own game, launch padding 50-50 and first moving. Reet, Favs, and Snacky were able to clutch out barely a 10th place with 60 eliminations by surfing tarps in the first moving and barely surviving together. Arkham continues to tarp the mid ground until he sees the opportunity to win FNCS. Arkham claims the low ground, establishing themselves on a power layer. Unfortunately, they weren't able to capitalize on their low ground positioning because very few players dropped down to low ground, and when it got to the final 3v3, the zone played up a mountain, resulting in Epicwell, Arkham, and Rex getting an 8-kill second. Unfortunately, this was simply not enough. Reet, Favs, and Snacky had 15 more points and were barely able to hold the gap. Nonetheless, it was still a fantastic push towards the top from Epicwell, Arkham, and Rex, and it made an amazing story. And at the end of the day, it was too big of a lead for Arkham to overcome, but they did give it their all on day 2. And with Reet replacing Rex for Grand Royale, I'm ready to see complete and utter domination.